Well, hello. My name is Andrew Holbrook. I'm here on December 5th, 2024 at Edgewood College with...
Sister Priscilla Wood.
Thank you very much for taking some time to do this oral history.
You're most welcome. Happy to be here. So,
where did you grow up?
I grew up in rural Minnesota, about 40 miles west of the Twin Cities, on a small farm. Went to rural schools, a one-room school 1 year, four-room school in our little town, and then eventually to the large town, of which had about 3,000 people, which had an actual junior high and high school. So I was a public school kid. I never went to Catholic school. There wasn't one in our area, so. But I grew up, I loved the country. I spent my childhood playing in the woods and climbing trees and running around, and that and reading. Those are my two absolute favorite things to do. So
I want to ask you about your reading and your intellectual interests when you were younger. Who were some of the authors, or what were some of the books that shaped you?
I mean, this was kind of before, I think, my mother was the greatest influence, because we all have this vivid memory of her taking us to the public library in town, which was a good 12 miles away, and getting our library cards. I think we were 6 years old or something, and just discovering all these books. And we never came home without as many as we could probably take. So, and she was a reader, and we were probably one of the only farm families along the highway that got the daily Minneapolis paper. We had magazines in our house. I just devoured everything. So I've always loved stories. I especially love fiction. So as a kid, I mean, anything that was out there, everything from, Heidi and Bobbsey Twins and you name it, anything that was popular in the 50s is what I was probably reading. And then because I love to read, I had some really fine junior high and high school English teachers who said, why don't you read this book and why don't you try that book? So Dickens and, other things like that. I just was encouraged to read, so that's kind of was my, you name it, and I mostly read it.
That's wonderful. Has reading been a lifelong interest?
Like I said, partly because of my mom, I'm sure, but I mean, and I think in 7th grade I knew I wanted to be an English teacher. So that was just, I never wavered from that. That was just what I thought I was going to do, because if you love to read and you did well and you enjoyed it, and it just seemed, it was something that appealed to me. So, and that's it. Yeah. Did a lot of reading over the years.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what your family life was like growing up?
It was pretty quiet and simple. I have 2 sisters. I have an older sister and I have a twin sister. We're not identical, but we're each other's best friends and probably have been since the beginning. And so and when you grow up in a rural area, you don't have overnights and play dates. And if you got to see somebody you went to school with once in a great while, we would do that. But it was like I said, I remember just reading on the weekends or being outside. And then you did chores, you had to mow and rake and clean up. And my dad sold eggs. We had 2,000 chickens. Everyone goes, what? So every night after school, from about 5th grade on, we'd come home and change clothes and then have to pick eggs and clean eggs and pack eggs. And that was pretty much 7 days a week. And we just, I think we had a TV. I remember, of course, because I love stories, we were we watched every Western. My dad loved Westerns, so you name it. I could tell you who was in Gunsmoke and Bonanza and Rawhide, and Westerns were big. But so we watched TV, and it was very simple when I think about it, because we were in the country and it wasn't until high school and we could drive. And then I like plays. I was in plays in high school, junior and senior year, but that's because my mom didn't have to drive us 20 miles round trip to do something, So because we rode a bus route. It's very interesting. There were the kids who rode buses couldn't do any extracurriculars because they all happened after school. So there was kind of this, we still joke about the town kids and the farm kids, because if you lived on a rural bus route, you had to leave school immediately, and we were still on the bus for an hour. And anything, band, chorus, cheerleading, sports, all of that was after school. And so we didn't have a lot of stuff afterwards. When we would get home, we just did our own recreational life. So, yeah, so it was simple. I fought with my sisters. Everybody fights with their sisters. But we survived in one little bathroom and 5 people. So it was a little house. I thought it was fine until I went away to college and came home and said, oh my God, this place is so tiny. You don't even realize that till you get away. So, no, I have happy memories. So it was, despite all the things that go on, it was a great childhood as far as I'm concerned. So.
Where did you go to college? And
I went to, when I think about it now, it's very funny, because I'm not an overly, but I'm an extrovert naturally. But I did not want to go to the University of Minnesota. It just terrified me, the thought of, in those days, 40,000. Now it's 70. And so I got a scholarship to the College of St. Benedict, which is a Benedictine women's college north of the Twin Cities. It's the sister school to St. John's University. And in those days, it was very small. It was only about 500 students. And I was able to get some scholarship money, and so that's where I went for undergrad. Yeah. So my twin sister and I were the first in our family to go to college. So we were the only. My older sister Mary tried it and didn't like it. She went back right into the workforce. But so we were, and so yeah, it was first time I met sisters, the Benedictines. It was lovely. It was pre-Vatican II, so the sisters were in full habits and everything. And I liked some of them, and I mean, it wasn't like I was like, oh, and never felt any vocation to the Benedictine tradition, but there were some lovely women, and I had a pretty good education. I mean, that school's a great school now. I mean, they are, 3,000, and I mean, it's just grown and grown, and they've done very, very well. I was there in the days of just we used to call them the SCWCs, Small Catholic Women College. And Edgewood was one of them. I met somebody from Edgewood here, and they were about the same size and the same kind of world, run by the congregation of sisters and women's school and one dorm. And, they were about the same. I'd never heard of the Dominicans or Edgewood, but I just remember meeting a woman who was from here at some college thing, and she was from Edgewood College in Madison, and she said, oh, we're just another SCWC, Small Catholic Women's College. But it was fine for me. I loved not having hundreds and hundreds of people in everywhere, so it was just right for me, yeah. And then I got a degree in English and education, which was what I was going to do. And that's going to lead to your next question. How did I meet the Dominicans? Was they connected?
I'm curious. It sounds like for you, they were intimately connected.
Well, it was because I never had a job interview. So I said, well, there was an opening on the placement board, it was called, where people used to post openings in schools. And a woman who'd graduated ahead of me had written a letter saying, this is the best school in the world, it's just amazing, etc. She just went on, and the only reason she was leaving is because she was going to have a baby. And if anyone was interested in teaching at this, she just would urge us to, okay, so I went, Regina High School, Minneapolis, never heard of it. Well, I'm not going to teach in a Catholic high school for no money, but I'll go for the interview. I was all of 21 or something, So I got there, and it was the Cincinnati Dominican Sisters. And I would have signed up in about 5 minutes to teach there. It was just amazing place. I mean, first of all, there were 800 students. I mean, there was more people there in the college I'd gone to. These women, the sisters, were I met 2 of them who were just, I don't know, they were just amazing. The faculty was like, everybody was welcoming, and they had this incredible curriculum, and And I thought, if this is a place to learn how to teach, so for no money, I think my starting salary was $4,700. So I didn't have a car. I boarded with somebody. I walked to school. But I learned so much. And so I taught there for 3 years. And at the end of my third year, I just thought, if this is a nice, they make it look like a good way to live. And so I decided to just see if this was for me. So the fourth year I taught there, I actually lived with the sisters in the convent. And it was a terrific year. It was very formative, very important for me. And then I entered the novitiate. So it was because of them and that school that I'd never heard of St. Dominic. I mean, not that everybody does when you choose a congregation, but there's something that clicks that says this is the one.
Yeah.
That appealed to me. That as wonderful as the Benedictine sisters were, there was something else that I felt with the sisters at Regina. And things had changed. They had changed habits. They had their own names back. They were just so fun and normal and helpful. And we had wonderful faculty relationships with, they were just supported people, and many, many stories of that. So it was a wonderful experience there. Still one of my favorite places I ever worked was Regina, yeah. Which the diocese decided that we built the building, but the diocese owned the property, which was a lesson we learned. So unfortunately, with no much notice, they announced they were going to use it for something else. So that school is no longer in existence, but it was a wonderful place to teach, learn to teach. Like Sister Melissa, who's now 95, was the English Teacher of the Year for the state of Minnesota, and she was my English department chair. So pretty good credentials, and that's the quality of it. And then you learn that about the Cincinnati Dominicans, that the quality of education and preparation is it can't be matched, so. Yeah.
So it sounds like an immediate affinity that you felt for the.
Well, I did. I learned to teach. I knew nothing. I went from rural home, small town school, small college in the middle of the woods in northern Minnesota, central Minnesota, to Minneapolis, and kids are taking field trips to the Guthrie, which had just opened, and things like that. And we had speakers, and Sister Marjorie Vallot taught film study. She was showing movies and teaching film, a class which I later took at Notre Dame to get my master's degree. We would have these amazing plays, and their literary magazine was usually one of the top 3 in the state of Minnesota that these young women produced. So yeah, it was just a ripe, wonderful, environment. So
it really sounds.
Yeah, it was great.
So take me back just in terms of chronology. How old were you when you entered?
Well, I taught for 4 years, so I was 24 when I entered. 5 years before us, the median age was still probably 18, 19. When my crowd, we called it a crowd, only because there used to be big, but we still use that term. There were 7 of us, and 3 of us were 24. One was 34. One was 30, and the youngest was 20. So we had almost all of us had worked and had at least had some years of work experience and living on our own. And that was that change happened right around in the 70s. Well, first of all, the congregation decided not to accept women after high school. At those days, you had to have at least 2 years of college, was the minimum. Now we at least either college or work experience, So we were older. We thought we were older, and we thought we knew everything, at 24. But so we were a little different age group. It was, and religious life was a lot of change had happened when we entered. Sisters had changed. I never wore a habit. I mean, I have great respect for it, and it's beautiful, but it's never been part of my religious life experience. And we kept our own names, so all of that, for us, the change was internal, which takes a long time, but it wasn't changed because we looked different or took a different name or anything. So we were right at that. We entered in 70, so right at the things were really. I mean, well, the council was over, I think, in 67. So, and the sisters, as everyone knows, most sisters took the Vatican's request to, look at their way of life, look at their charism, adapt to modern times, and our sisters took that seriously. And it wasn't without pain. I mean, we missed most of the pain for people who found those changes very difficult. By the time we came along, many sisters who left because they entered at 17 and 18, and all of a sudden there was all these other opportunities for women. When people entered, when there were these huge crowds, people forget the only choice a woman had to work in the church was be the church secretary, sacristan, Catholic school teacher, or join a religious congregation. I mean, and so if you really felt a call to understand theology, you wanted to work, to have a faith-based life, whatever, that was a very normal thing to do. Well, by the 70s, things had changed. People were, my religious ed was run by lay people, choirs, liturgists. People were getting degrees, and women could do a lot, and that's only continued in the future. So there were a lot of reasons for people not to come in droves. So a group of 7 was a good sized number, So, and we only had one of our sisters who left after 10 years, and it was just her awareness that wasn't for her. But otherwise, all of us were lifetime. So when you come a little later and you've thought about it more and you have made some real choices, it's not like you've never known anything else. It tends to, you stick with it kind of thing. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
It sounds like a really interesting moment of transition.
Yeah. I mean, we were kind of unaware of all the turmoil because, when we would pray, we still prayed the Liturgy of the Hours, but it was in English. Well, for us, it's in English. Well, I forgot they ever did it in Latin, I mean, I hardly remember the Latin Mass, and there were many, the sisters, especially at the mother house, older, whose most of their religious life had been another way. So really the courage and the creativity of those women to face that upheaval and change, it was a lot was asked of them, And many of them were really good to us. A few of them looked at us and were like, our legs were showing and our hair was showing, and they were not thrilled. But, we all survived it, so.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you were doing around the time or slightly before the time when you made your way to Edgewood?
Well, of my 52 years, I've spent almost 35 in congregation ministry. I taught school, and then in the summer, like all sisters, you went to summer school to get your master's degree. And then after teaching for 10 years or so, I asked for a semester off to study, just to refresh studies. I was teaching in Milwaukee at Dominican High School. And while I was there, I got a phone call, and it was Lincoln's birthday. I still remember that. And it was Sister Cecilia, whose picture is right there, who came from here to be prioress of the congregation in the 80s, and said, so I want you to think about coming to the Mound as the next director of communications. I said, oh, really? Well, we had they had just, someone before me had done it for a couple of years, but I said, of course, it never occurred to me to say no. I mean, if you get asked to do something and Cecilia calls you, you kind of feel like you should say yes. I said, well, I'm going to need to study because it means graphic design, photography, writing I can do, but I really need, she said, okay. So I spent I'd been there doing communications because I was doing a lot of teaching of English and like mass media. I was doing film study and all that stuff. So anyway, I stayed at Iowa. I was at the University of Iowa. So I ended up another semester and did darkroom and video and graphics and all that stuff. And then I was at the Mound for 5 years in that position. Oh, I'm sorry, that's my phone. And then when that was over, I was kind of at a crossroads because I'd been out of the classroom for 6 years. And I was like, do I want to just walk back into high school? Or do I want to do something else? And I was at odds and ends, as they say, and really didn't know what to do. And then I was on a committee. We're always on committees. And we were having something at the Mound called the Year of the Arts, which was a whole year we planned, celebrating the arts in our own lives, in our local communities, in the congregation's history, etc. So there were sisters who were musicians and artists, and because I was on the communications office, I was on it. Sister Cecilia was the chair, etc. And on this committee was a sister named Carol Artery, who I only knew by reputation, that she was this incredible pianist and great, worked with kids. I was just this great school musician and had done all this stuff. So we really didn't know each other, but we're on a break and she said, do you know of anybody, she kind of said it out loud, who'd love to work with me and do like arts education in the South with our schools that can't afford anything like that? And I'm telling you, it was like fireworks went off in my head. I just said, I would. She looked at me. She said, you would? I said, oh my gosh, it sounds like the most wonderful thing in the world. She said, well, and she didn't know me really either. And she went, really? I said, yeah, I'm done with this job in May. This was like, the fall or something. And she said, oh, let's talk. So out of Carol had traveled to the schools we had in the South and was so aware as a music teacher that the schools that could afford a music teacher didn't need her. They could afford somebody else. And the schools that really needed her couldn't afford anything. And she said, I think 6 weeks of music is better than never. So she had this dream of being itinerant and traveling from schools to schools and doing like 6 weeks music every 2 or 3 days a week, or art or dancing, drama. I was into all. So we created this ministry called the Dominican Arts Project. And it's unique in the history of the congregation, and it was and we did that with a few interruptions for almost 25 years.
Wow.
So we started from 84 to 86. It was absolutely as creative as you can imagine. And we had everything crammed in a Chevy Cavalier, from a keyboard and stand and art supplies and books and puppets and you name it. And we headed south and we did all of our schools in Mobile, Chickasaw, Tuskegee, Apalachicola, Florida, inner city, Sacred Heart, Washington, D.C. And then we'd take a break in the summer, and then we'd start, and then in 2 years into it, Carol was elected to leadership, which I think I cried harder at that than anything. I cried at it in a long time. And so for those 4 years, I stayed in Alabama and taught at an African-American high school called St. Jude High School, which I cried when I got there and I cried when I left. So I learned to love those kids too. But then it was, when her term was up, she said, do you want to do the arts project? I said, absolutely. So then we did it for the next 15 years. Based in New Orleans, we did our schools in Oklahoma. We did, I can't even tell you, I can't even remember all the we went to Guatemala with our sisters there for 6 weeks. We did great plays. We wrote our own plays. We got some published. And in the meantime, Sister Mary Ellen O'Grady was here, and she said, you should be teaching the arts class to the elementary ed majors. They're all dying. I don't know I can't judge anything because we were not around. And well, Joe, you probably have heard of Dr. Joe Schminicki.
Yes.
He was the head of the ed department. He was wonderful to us, and we loved working with Joe. And he could see all the potential in things. He said, I think this would be terrific. So we taught a 4-credit course every winterim for 16 years. And then we taught every summer, the same class, I think 14 of the 16 years we taught summer school. So that was my connection. We started here, and people loved the class, and Joe was thrilled. And so that's what I did before I got to Edgewood. And all the years that we were at Edgewood, we were doing it. Because what we would say to the students is, what we're doing is classroom tested. Everything we do, they learned to play the recorder. They learned basic dances. We made puppets. They had to do puppet plays. They had to script Reader's Theater things. They had to perform in front of each other. They had to read books. They had to do all, anyway, it was kind of, and we had them, we started at 8 in the morning and taught till 2 in the afternoon, for 2 weeks, 10 days. And then we had to correct all their projects, and then we drive back down to New Orleans, which is where we were based, so. And then we'd start a school up the next day or something else. We were young and foolish, but it was a lot of work. But we really, and most of the time, it was very, very enjoyable. You know, well, once in a while, summer school was harder because people were not as focused, but
sure,
it wasn't our favorite. And then poor summer school, we taught in the Science Center. We taught in the library. We taught in the Mazzucchelli Science Building. We taught in Predolin. We taught in the, they never knew where to put us because we needed tables, not desks, and we needed the room. We couldn't just keep packing it up at the end of every day. So we had some interesting experiences with the traditions of Edgewood. Let's put it that way, about who gets what room and, stuff like that, so.
Are there any Edgewood stories that stand out from those years?
Well, we used to do, for their final project, they had to perform in the Anderson Auditorium. And we would open it up to anybody who wanted to come. So it got to be a pretty big deal. Teachers would come, and faculty who were around, and people were kind of amazed, at what these kids could do. Sometimes I was amazed at what their projects were so creative, and puppet shows and dances and all this kind of stuff. I don't know, we just had, there weren't that many people around. We got to know staff more than faculty because we could never get a library card. That's one of my stories. The library would never have us in the system. And we want to check out resources, and show them these resources from the curriculum library. Well, you're not in the system. We go, okay, this is our 10th year here. And every year we go through, and finally, we got to be real good friends with the head librarian, who finally would recognize us after year and say, it's okay, put them in the, So people would say, you work here? We go, oh yeah, they're here. But it would be, who knew us? The custodians, the secretaries, the office people. We didn't know a lot of faculty, but we loved it that we could never get an ID card or a library card. Every time we came, we had to start all over again. So winterim people were kind of the oddball. There were very few classes. But see, the ed majors, this was a required course. And some of them literally, we finished on Friday. Usually it was Martin Luther King Monday. And some of them started student teaching Tuesday, or had to be in their schools on Tuesday. So it was a requirement, and so they were very concerned that they got the class, and we wanted them to have what they needed. And I actually met a young woman, is the principal of Holy Ghost Immaculate Conception Catholic School in Dickeyville, which is near the Mound. And I was over there to give a talk or something one day, and she looked at me and she said, Sister Priscilla. And I said, yeah. She goes, I still have my puppet from your class. She was an Edgewood grad, and years ago she still had her puppet. And she was like, well, good for you. I said, I'm happy to hear that. So every once in a while, there's somebody out there that probably still has their puppet from arts ed, methods in the arts. So,
gosh, that's wonderful. As a teacher, you kind of never know how long that influence is going to last, but it's wonderful.
And the other best story is the very first class was probably, of all of them, we hate to rank kids, but that first class, probably because it was so new, was probably the most remarkable. They were just amazing group of young people. And there was no dining hall. There was a snack bar in the basement of Regina, I don't know where we were eating anyway. They'd say, have lunch with us, and we would do things like that. But one of the young women named Jelaine Connor did summer theater, and she had a lovely voice. And we would have these conversations all the time, and toward the end of it, they were saying, Jelaine, you should student teach with Carol and Priscilla. And she went, oh, she said, I'd love it, but I don't think I could do that. So we went to Joe and said, she's very mature. She's not a kid. We said, if she really wants to come, do you think you would waive? We said, she won't be doing lesson plans the way she already knows how, but I meant, she's going to be with us. She's going to teach every grade. We did pre-K through 8th grade, and we also did high school. So he said the experience alone would be unbelievable for her. So we said, if you want to come, we would love to have you. But, she'd never been out of Wisconsin, which was untypical, at that point. Anyway, Jelaine did come. She came in September and was with us till Christmas. And I just spent Thanksgiving with her. We did their wedding. I preached at their wedding. We're godmother to the kids. We've known them they've been married 27 years, and Jelaine went from us she graduated in Edgewood, and then she went and got her master's in UW Milwaukee, because her sister was born deaf, and so she grew up, they're very close in age. So she learned sign and is real committed to the deaf community, so she got her master's in deaf and hard of hearing. And they told her that the best lesson plans they ever had were hers from Edgewood, that she learned at Edgewood. And she's still the director for that program for Edgewood and all those small towns around Janesville, like 2 school districts. She's the director of deaf and hard of hearing education. So, yeah, that's a lifelong Edgewood connection. And a few other of her friends who we had in that class, we've gotten together with them. So it was real special, yeah.
Wow, that does sound like a remarkable.
So it was a slice of Edgewood most people don't have. So, I can't talk about the campus spirit because there were very few students on campus. And we never were involved in faculty life. So it's an Edgewood experience, but it was kind of one of a kind, I guess you could say. So.
No, and I appreciate that. And my last 2 questions, even though it was a one-of-a-kind experience, I wondered if you could speak to the core values of Edgewood: truth, compassion, justice, partnership, community, the 5 core values. Is there one that speaks to you the most from your experience?
So those really weren't around yet when we were here. Well, I certainly think, like it is working with Dr. Schminneke, for example, and Sister Margaret O'Brien and people in the ed department. Certainly a partnership of what do you want to do? What would be the best thing for these students? How can we work with you? There was no question that was always the highest value, So I call that partnership, where you could work with people and raise it. Could we try this? And how do we grade this? And what does that mean? And so Joe was always so supportive of things like that. I think there's this community spirit. There always has been at Edgewood. And even though we weren't a big part of it, I'd have to say the way we were always welcomed, other than the library card. And, people, oh, you're back, and they had stories about listening to the recorders coming down the hall. There just was they always welcomed us, I should say. We always felt welcome. So those were the 2 I would think of the most. I think the partnership with administration and the ed department being as open as it was, and everybody kind of helping us because we didn't know where stuff was or who to ask, and we were so welcome. And then I think so I guess partnership, and then I'd say that sense of community would probably be the two that would stand out to me the most. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you're currently doing?
Oh my, see, join the convent, see the world, you do things you never thought you'd do. So after almost 20 years of the arts project, we were both getting a little older, and it was a lot of work. I mean, just to say, we were based in New Orleans the last 10 years. We still went to Tuskegee because our sisters had a long history in Tuskegee, Alabama. We would do a 3-week arts camp. We do everything in 3 weeks and put on a play and everything. But in New Orleans, we worked with the inner city schools, and we would do 2 schools a week. So Monday and Wednesday, we taught all day in one school, and another, then Tuesday, Thursday, another, and then Fridays we'd catch up or do rehearsals or whatever. So it was a lot of work, but we taught in every inner city Catholic school in New Orleans for years. I mean, we had a good reputation, and we did a lot of good, even though we saw a lot of poverty and a lot of tough situations, and the arts sometimes were the only thing many of these kids excelled in or got excited about. Too many stories to tell there. But the congregation had sent out an opening for the arts office at the Mound. We used to have an office of arts and heritage, and there hadn't been anybody in it for quite a few years, and they realized we had this vast art collection and all the historical artifacts that needed attention, and would anybody be interested? So Carol and I we had a bedroom with our computers in it, and I saw that opening, and I'm thinking, She was on the other side of the room going, and we didn't want to say anything to each other. And then finally a couple days went by, and I said, did you see that? And, we both been, she said, we have friends and family up north. We've been south. We only came home twice a year, Christmas and summer. So I said, well, let's go up this summer, as we did, and then talk to people about it and see what we think it would be. And because we didn't want to say yes. We loved what we did, but I knew Carol's, but Carol was almost 10 years older than me. So she was getting older and had some health issues, and there were some reasons to think about slowing down a little bit. So we came up, and we always packed up, because we had to bring a lot of stuff home to teach anyway. And then because of hurricanes, we never knew what was going to happen. So we would leave some of our stuff with the Cabra Dominicans, with this wonderful group of sisters from Ireland, Dominican sisters who taught in New Orleans for many, many, many years. Another long story. So they had some of our stuff, like the extra keyboard and things like that. Anyway, while we were at the Mound in August of 2005, Katrina hit. And we're sitting there looking at our computer, and there's a street sign, Elysian Fields and Robert E. Lee, and the water was just under the street sign, the name of the street. So that was about 12 feet. And our house was near that neighborhood, because when the levee broke, it hit the poorer side of top. So, long story short, there was nothing to go back to. All of our schools were either one was literally washed away. One of them only reopened, most of them only reopened 3 years later when they got FEMA money, and some never reopened or had to be torn down because of flooding. So it was as painful as it was. We realized, we kind of had this decision made that we were going to stay up north. So we did go down in the spring, which was almost too painful because it was still just... And then the house that the sisters had, they had moved everything to the second floor before they left town for the hurricane. And they couldn't come back for 8 weeks. And when they came back, the water was just under the ceiling of the first floor of their house. So everything was black mold and everything was pitched anyway. So the house, they never went back. They couldn't, I think they had to tear it down because So anyway, in 2005, we kind of had a direction change. Luckily, we had thought about it and thought it might be and so we grew into it. So, so what that meant is we have a huge art collection of our sisters' artwork, but a lot of it needed framing. A lot of it nothing had been organized. There wasn't, and then we had an exhibit space, but it wasn't. It was fluorescent lights and tables around it. So anyway, one of our goals was to do a beautiful new exhibit of our history, and then we got the artwork organized and up on walls and started doing gallery shows again, and had arts programs for children, and that's kind of okay. Then Sister Carol got cancer and died in 2009. So I've been doing it by myself, which changed things somewhat. But I'm kind of the queen of tours. I tour people through the Mazzucchelli exhibit, through the Sisters exhibit, do a lot of talks on Father Samuel or programs on the early sisters. I've done tons of framing. I have artwork everywhere. I took about 150 pieces to the new sisters' residence in Muskego, and they have a whole art gallery of art there. I'm on a million committees. I just got asked by the high school to help them with their Heritage Hall. I'm doing something at Dominican University, helping them with their Heritage Project. So keeps me off the streets and out of trouble. So that's what I do. And that's what I've been doing for the past 19 years. So
I'll say that's quite a lot.
That's what I do. That's what I do, Andrew.
Is there any last wisdom you'd like to impart before we conclude our conversation?
Well, I would have to say I've always loved Edgewood. It has its own flavor. I love coming back here. I love teaching here. It was a good experience. So, and I'm proud of what our sisters started, and I'm proud of how it's been carried forward into the future. And now I hear it's going to be Edgewood University, which is very exciting. That's just great news. So may it just continue to grow and flourish in the best Dominican spirit. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sister Priscilla, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Yeah.